Reverse City. Author's note: Reverse City was retroactively added to take place between Vanishing Journey and Choo Choo Island, likely to bridge the level gap between the two areas. The Arcane Reverse storyline began the tradition of having new story areas released every 5 levels, and so Reverse City being set at level 205 creates an intermediary area between Vanishing Journey, which is level 200 content, and Choo Choo Island, which is level 210 content. Reverse City was added 3 years after Vanishing Journey in the Rise update, which was the beginning of the first phase of the Continental Grandis storyline, along with Yum Yum Island and Celis. Reverse City was made to set up future Grandis content by introducing T-Boy as an antagonist, as well as to remind people that Earth is sadly still a thing. One thing to keep in mind is that Reverse City, along with Yum Yum Island and Celis, isn't actually a required story area to keep progressing through the game, meaning that it's functionally similar to a theme dungeon more than anything else. Because of this, future storylines are set up so that they can trigger conditional exclusive dialogue depending on whether or not you've cleared these areas, which is also true in the case of several other theme dungeons, like Detective Rave's case notes. While this means that it's not absolutely canon that the adversary complete these storylines, for the purpose of this site, I'm running with the assumption that we did. In future sections, I'll be sure to put the author's note what I'll put in the author's note what exclusive dialogue plays out in those specific moments if you didn't happen to do the optional theme dungeons or story areas. Before the adversary could continue on their journey, Chief Legato asked them to return to Nameless Town. He showed them an old walkie-talkie emitting garbled sounds and static, and explained that it was washed up on the riverbank from a nearby city. The adversary recognized that the city didn't come from Maple World, though it looked familiar nonetheless. Legato told them the flow of the river had been disrupted in the city and asked them to investigate. Author's note: Kinesis has some exclusive dialogue here, in which he realizes that there might be someone from Earth who needs his help there. Upon entering the city, the adversary realized that everything was upside down, and even the ceiling having become the floor. Oh, and, and even the ceiling having become the floor. A stranger with a computer screen face welcomed them to Reverse City and introduced himself as T-Boy, the most normal person in Reverse City. However, he added that no one would argue if he introduced himself as the city's most dangerous person, and used his gauntlet to levitate the adversary in midair before crushing them with strong gravitational forces. As his gauntlet began to overheat, the gravitational force increased in power, though T-Boy was completely unconcerned, merely claiming that there was something appealing about uncontrollable power. He told them that power and control weren't so important as something else, but before he could explain what it was, a girl named Rassel arrived and told T-Boy to leave. However, T-Boy merely laughed and asked what she planned to do in order to make him go. Just then, the gauntlet announced that it was about to overheat. As it began counting down, Rassel begged him to shut it down, though T-Boy only laughed as the countdown reached 0. At the last possible minute, T-Boy shut the gauntlet down and claimed that it had merely been a prank. Author's note: T-Boy, calm down. It's just a prank, bro. God, you're so dramatic. Can't you take a joke? You're fine. You didn't even have a scratch on you. It's not like you'd get hurt anyways. You want to know what would hurt? If your dad called you a disposable object and an absolute disappointment of a son. Haha. Yup. Still waiting for him to tell me that was just a prank. The adversary nervously dialed their therapist. Hey Laura, I found another one for you. Yup, daddy issues. Do you think you can fit him in sooner? He wants to blow himself up and level a whole city. I don't think the friendship talk is gonna cut it with this one. As the adversary fell unconscious, T-Boy declared that he saw things in their future before leaving. After T-Boy left, Rassel carried the unconscious adversary back to her town. Upon awakening, the adversary saw that the people in the town were all Erdas, though they had more human features than the ones in Vanishing Journey. A man named Alamo explained that one day T-Boy had shown up out of the blue and turned the entire city upside down. forcing them to live like sewer rats in the subway tunnels where they didn't get even a single ray of sunlight. Alamo then asked why the adversary had come, and so the adversary showed the townspeople the walkie-talkie that had washed up. Rassel realized that it belonged to Bar Granger, a man who had helped the people of Reverse City. Rassel began to escort the adversary to Bar, explaining that he was an overworlder who had come from another world, and that he had gotten trapped along with the city when it had been sucked into the arcane river. Author's note: Kinesis has some exclusive dialogue here, in which he realizes that Bar comes from the same world as him. Thanks to Bar, the people of the town had learned to survive after T-Boy had forced them into the subway tunnels. She showed them one of Bar's books, entitled Surviving in the Jungle, with the author's blurb stating, "What matters most to the survivor isn't skills or knowledge, it's the will to live." Author's note: This can be interpreted as foreshadowing for Limina, in which the adversary is only able to awaken the seal stone after abandoning the mindset that they need to sacrifice themselves, and instead focusing on their will to survive. Kinesis also gets some exclusive dialogue here, in which he notes to himself that he's never heard of the book before, and that the cover doesn't inspire confidence either. On the way, they encountered Erda rats, which Rassel explained were normal Erda that had changed shape after encountering the rats in the tunnel. The adversary wondered whether Rassel and the others in the town were also Erda that had changed shape to resemble the humans from Earth. Rassel asked them to hunt the Erda rats for their blue meat, and Montos for their purple rat meat, in order to bring it to Bar. She then showed them a flickering screen that depicted a sunset, explaining that since she had been born in the tunnels, it was the closest thing that she had seen to a real sunset. Just then, Bar arrived, and the adversary showed him the walkie-talkie. Author's note: If the player is a Kinesis, Bar will note that Kinesis comes from the same world as him, although he also notes that Kinesis isn't like him, likely referring to the fact that Kinesis has superpowers. He asks Kinesis if he's come to return the walkie-talkie, to which Kinesis tells him that it's not the only reason, as he's on a mission to return people from their world back home. Bar then replies that Kinesis has wasted a trip by coming all this way, which transitions back into the generic script below. However, Bar told them that he didn't need it anymore and refused to take it back. Suddenly, the tunnels began to shake, and Rassel realized that it was T-Boy working on something. She asked Bar if she could borrow his map, and he refused to give it up. She and the adversary then went into the tunnel system alone and found that it was a giant labyrinth. Rassel explained that Bar's map was the only thing that could help them navigate the area, adding that he was keeping it safe from T-Boy. Inside the trains, they found several machines that appeared to be part of a laboratory. Just then, a T-drone detected their intrusion and summoned attack drones. Rassel was impressed by how easily the adversary took down the drones, and wondered why T-Boy had been able to defeat them if they were so strong. Author's note: It's revealed in the Kurote storyline that T-Boy was modified by his father using Angler Company technology that had been stolen from Odium. The entire Angler family was enhanced with cybernetic augmentation in a way that made them nearly indistinguishable from the vessels that the Elders had created. Since the vessels created in Odium had been designed to face the ancient gods, it makes sense that the technology used to enhance them would make them significantly stronger. Continuing on, they found several sensitive materials that the drones were attempting to wipe. The adversary hunted down the drones and collected T-Boy's research notes. They then proceeded deeper into T-Boy's laboratory, where they found what appeared to be a gravity machine that burned Erda for fuel. According to the research notes, they learned that T-Boy planned to harvest Erda from the upstream of the Arcane River and use extinction accelerators to create more Erda upon depletion of the river. With the Erda, he planned to concentrate gravity above the city in order to create a black hole. Author's note: The Odium storyline reveals that T-Boy was planning to create the black hole generator in order to generate energy for his father, whose power source had been destroyed in the explosion at Angler Company headquarters. If you look closely at some of the monsters in Reverse City, you'll notice that some of the robots are using the Erda rats as power sources, just like what T-Boy mentioned in his research notes about using Erda as fuel. Just then, a T-drone appeared and started a video call, showing T-Boy's computer face on its display. Rassel asked T-Boy why he was attempting to create a black hole, but he refused to answer, instead ordering the T-drone to turn on the prototype extinction accelerator. T-Boy then sealed the doors and ended the video call, trapping them inside. The adversary prepared to bust down the doors when Barr appeared and told them that the doors were specifically reinforced, or specially reinforced. However, he explained that the train cars had manual door overrides and managed to open the door for them to escape before the extinction accelerator exploded. After they escaped, Rassel asked Barr if he had already known about T-Boy's plan. Barr admitted that T-Boy sometimes visited to borrow his books and frequently talked to himself while doing so. He told them how T-Boy was the only one who read and appreciated his survival books, and that he had suggested that Barr's next book should be about how to survive a black hole, which was how he had indirectly revealed his plans. Upon learning what T-Boy was about to do, Barr had raised his gun at T-Boy, but had found that he was unable to muster the courage to pull the trigger. Rassel asked Barr how he could have let T-Boy walk away after learning that T-Boy was about to effectively trap them in the city forever and ensure that Barr could never return home. Author's note: Kinesis has some exclusive dialogue in which he notes that he could just send Barr back home himself. He decides to let things play out for now. Barr told them that the surface wasn't as good as they believed, but Rassel was determined to stop T-Boy and headed back to town. Barr then called the adversary much braver than he was after learning that they were going to help Rassel. The adversary gave Barr back the walkie-talkie and told him that they had heard human voices from it. Author's note: You also get to choose how you motivate Barr by telling him that that either that you have run away from fights before or that you choose to be brave now. Oh, and that you choose to be brave now. Or that you've never run from a fight, and though that might make you brave, there's more to be afraid of in life than just fighting. The adversary returned to town and found the townspeople debating about whether they should stay or head to the surface. Many believed that they couldn't fight T-Boy without Bar's help, but Rassel told them about the adversary's power and how they could help the town. Though Alamo told Rassel that she wasn't an expert or that she couldn't expect a stranger to fight for them, Rassel revealed that she had grabbed some of the many arcane symbols in T-Boy's research lab and offered them as payment. Just as the adversary agreed to help, Barr arrived and offered his map of the subway. However, Barr told Rassel to stay out of the fight. He then told the adversary that they could ignore the extinction accelerators, since the only thing that they needed to destroy in order to win was the gravity machine. Barr then told Rassel that he needed her help in order to defeat T-Boy. He taught her how to disable the extinction accelerators and gave her T-Boy's research notes and the map, asking her to also evacuate the townspeople before T-Boy found their refuge. The adversary and Barr entered the train system, where they encountered a T-drone and many combat bots. Barr explained that some of the bots even had their own anti-gravity units, powered by living creatures like the subway rats. From the T-drone, T-Boy's computerized face appeared and told them that he had cut power to the train and switched the tracks to have the train crash. However, Barr revealed that he knew how to restore power, overriding T-Boy once again. Barr asked the adversary to collect drone parts in order to build his override. After obtaining the parts, the adversary defended Barr while he continued building. As they continued onward, they found that it was nighttime on the surface. Barr told them that he and his friends used to watch the sunset while the gate between the Arcane River and the Earth was still open. He explained that when the gate had first opened, he and his friends had worked together to find survivors and send them back to Earth, and that they had planned to go back themselves after saving everyone. However, he told the adversary that there had been an accident that had prevented him from returning along with them. Author's note: Kinesis has some exclusive dialogue here in which he notes to himself that it's always nice to remember that he's not the only one sending the people of Earth back home. This line was actually changed from what it was originally, although I'm not sure when exactly that change happened. In the original line, Kinesis notes to himself that sending the displaced people of Earth back home is supposed to be his job, almost in a guilty sort of way. I'm guessing that the reason why it was changed was for the sake of his characterization, since there isn't really any reason why he should feel guilty about not saving the humans in Reverse City when he didn't even know that they were trapped in the first place. Just then, a T-drone arrived and T-Boy laughed, telling Bar that the truth was that he had been left behind. He then told the adversary that they and Bar were two of a kind, as the townspeople had abandoned them, just as Bar's friend had left him, asking whether the townspeople even cared about them. Author's note: here you can either say that they do, or you can say nothing. T-Boy claimed that while the townspeople called the adversary a hero, they were simply using them. However, he reassured them that he understood both the adversary and Bar, as all three of them were outsiders to their very core, adding that it was lucky that they had found each other. Laughing that he had even brought them a gift, T-Boy summoned a wave of battle drones before disappearing. After fighting through the enemy drones, the pair began hopping to the next car when T-Boy himself arrived to confront them, rather than through his T-drone, explaining that he had only found the empty refuge after sending his drones to find the townspeople. Bar then revealed how the townspeople had already deactivated his extinction accelerators and escaped. Though T-Boy was surprised, he claimed that it would make no difference, as he would simply make more once he had eliminated them both. Bar retorted that it wouldn't be easy to get rid of them both, to which T-Boy asked him what he meant by both, and whether it was him trying to prove a point that he finally had a friend whom he could trust. He laughed and claimed that it would simply end as it had before, with Bar being left alone and abandoned by his new so-called friend. Sticking up for Bar, the adversary retorted to T-Boy's provocations by pointing out that he kept going on and on about how they and Bar had no real friends, but that they had but then had claimed that T-Boy was the real lonely one, adding that even if they and Bar were losers, it took one to know one. Stunning T-Boy into silence, the adversary continued on that they were starting to understand his plan, explaining that if he were to turn the whole world upside down, then that would mean that he would finally be the normal one. They then added that his plan was so childish that it was bordering on pathetic. Author's note: the way that this dialogue is presented is that we can pick and choose one of two retorts to say first, although we'll automatically continue on with the second one no matter what. I wrote them in the order that they were presented since we end up canonically saying both of them anyways. Irritated, T-Boy decided to start up the gravity machine without supplying sufficient power, which would cause it to go critical and explode as if it were a giant extinction accelerator, resulting in the destruction of the entire city. The shocked adversary retorted that T-Boy was insane, as the explosion would kill him too, to which T-Boy merely laughed and replied that it sounded like a fun time, adding that the three of them were about to have a real blast. The adversary realized that they needed to take T-Boy out immediately, but Bar replied that it wouldn't help, and that they needed to dismantle the gravity machine. T-Boy then laughed that they ought to hurry to the tower, and offered to help them by causing the train to speed up 3 times its original velocity. As the T-drone issued a warning to decelerate in order to avoid derailing from the impending track curvature, T-Boy claimed that according to his calculations, they would crash straight into M Tower. Bar immediately told the adversary to grab seat cushions to lessen the impact, as they had no time to stop the train. T-Boy then told them that he had told what he had told them before, told them that he had told them before that power and control didn't matter, as the only thing that was important was sending a message. The adversary asked him what he was talking about, to which T-Boy told them that he was telling them to remember his name, adding that he was T-Boy, and that he was the one who was about to turn their whole world upside down. Author's note: the Angler family is honestly one of my favorite parts of the grandest storyline, just because of their dynamics. You can very clearly see not only how each of the Angler's children's personalities have been shaped by the abuse of their fathers, or by their father, but you can also see aspects of Alter's own personality that he unconsciously programmed into them, making them all a fractured mosaic image of his own damaged psyche. Senya has a level of perfectionism that she shares with her father, who demands nothing but perfect results from all of his children and physically harms them if they don't meet his expectations, either by arranging for their deaths or killing them himself. She has a cheerful persona that she uses as a facade, not only to manipulate other people to take advantage of their lowered guards, but also as a defense mechanism for herself in order to hide her pain from her father so that he won't discard her as weak or useless. We don't really see much of Kazum, since he's completely free from his father's programming when we see him in the story, and while we also don't see much of Laha, we still get to see that she's inherited a lot of her father's cruelty, ruthlessness, and tenacity. Unlike Senya, Laha has very little sense of subtlety, which is likely an aspect of her own personality, not her father's. But, like all the Angler children, Laha is quite afraid of her father, and is ready to throw anyone under the bus if it means avoiding being physically or psychologically abused by him. On the other hand, T-Boy, to me, seems like he's the most like Atler. I like to view T-Boy as the black sheep of the family, even more so than Kazum, because unlike Senya's perfectionism or Laha's cold inefficiency, he shares what I think is the core element of Atler's personality, a crippling sense of isolation and a desperate need to be recognized, to the point of being ready to kill himself for it. You can see from his behavior in Reverse City that he feels like he doesn't fit in anywhere, not with his family and not with the world, and his loneliness combined with his trauma manifests in self destructive behavior and a complete disregard for his own life, which is something that a lot of children in abusive homes develop. He has a penchant for theatrics and jokes, and quite often the punchline to his jokes are him teasing the fact that he's ready to kill himself when his machines go critical and blow up, and it makes me really sad to see someone who's just a kid regard his own life with such dispense, or as so dispensable. Later on in the Kurote storyline, it's revealed that at least a portion of his self destructive and risk seeking behavior was programmed into him by his father. I like to imagine that this kind of behavior is what makes T-Boy the most like his father out of anyone else in his family. In the Kurote storyline, we learn that his father was a vessel who underwent experiments in odium in order to become an adversary, although he was deemed a defective vessel and thrown out of odium, after which he was sent plummeting from the sky, what the elders had likely intended to be his death. However, Atler survived his fall because of his cybernetic enhancements, and as a result of the experiments, Atler experienced what the elders called contamination, which was was an erasure of his ego and his sense of self. His humanity, his emotions, and his morals were erased from him, leaving him with a singular drive to become an adversary. Since Atler was a defective vessel, it likely means that his ego couldn't be completely erased, leaving him in a state where he still retained a portion of his original self, while having everything else erased from him. While the successful adversaries of Odium were functionally machines, Atler can still feel pain and experience trauma. While he couldn't be a successful adversary, the experiments took away all his free will and hardwired him with a singular desire to fulfill his purpose, even though he's incapable of becoming an adversary. As a result, Atler spent ages trying to reach Odium in order to not only carry out his mission, but because he himself carries all the trauma and abuse that the elders inflicted on him by disc by discreting? Oh, desecrating. his mind and body, and then discarding him like he was a worthless piece of garbage. Alter shares a lot of his isolation and self-destructive behavior with T-Boy, which you can see from his actions. He built Kurote endlessly in order to prove that he's not useless, and all of his efforts were met with more abuse at the hands of the elders, who had Guardian Kalos repeatedly throw him over 30,000 feet from the sky, once again reinforcing the fact that even in spite of all his painstaking efforts, nothing that he does will ever be good enough for them if he's incapable of becoming the one thing that they want him to be, which is the one thing that he's physically incapable of, a fact which I'm sure causes him considerable distress, since the failed experiments still left him with enough emotions to feel just how much of a failure he is. But no matter what, Atler continues risking his life like he doesn't matter because he was programmed to fulfill his purpose by the elders, meaning that his ability to care about himself was taken away from him. However, since he still retains a portion of his ego, he still experiences pain and loneliness from his failures, with each of them reminding him that he was thoroughly ruined by the very people whose validation he's hardwired to crave, which was similarly programmed into T-Boy, manifesting for him as self-destructive behavior and a need to be validated by the abusive man who made it so that he had no choice but to see himself as a dispensable object. This parallel between T-Boy and Atler can be seen most clearly in how T-Boy's fate echoes the generational trauma shared with his father. Just like how Atler was deemed a failure and thrown off of Odium by the elders, T-Boy was deemed worthless by his father, who arranged for him to fall to his apparent death from Kurote. The dynamics of the Angler family are honestly so interesting to me because of how morally gray everything is. Atler suffered an immense amount of trauma from the elders, and since he had his free will and morality stripped from him, you fundamentally cannot hold him accountable for his actions because he has no ability to distinguish right from wrong, and he has no choice but to behave as the elders made him. At the same time, however, Atler's children have also undergone horrendous abuse at the hands of their father, including an impairment of their own free will. And even if Atler can't be held responsible for an object from an objective lens, his children absolutely aren't required to see it that way, which leads to an interesting question about how Atler should be viewed as a person, since the abuse that he's inflicted was done because he has no agency of his own, but the trauma that his children have to carry can't just be waved away and forgotten simply because their father wasn't responsible for his actions. After the train crashed into M Tower, the adversary struggled to stand up, just as an injured T-Boy appeared and used his gauntlet to begin crushing them, just like he had when they had first met. Suddenly, Barr appeared and pointed his gun at T-Boy, claiming that he had realized that T-Boy wasn't really there, and that the person standing before them was just another drone, while his real body was somewhere safe and far away, which would explain why T-Boy wasn't being affected by the city's reversed gravity. Barr then called T-Boy a coward, claiming that he didn't even have the guts to face real danger with his life on the line. After a pause, T-Boy, with his damaged vocoder, asked him what difference it made, to which Barr explained that it meant that he wouldn't feel any guilt about pulling the trigger, now that he knew he was only shooting a drone. Barr then shot T-Boy in the face, shattering his computerized helmet. As the adversary recovered from T-Boy's attack, Barr came over to check on them, explaining that the real T-Boy was never in Reverse City to begin with, which was why he had been so unconcerned about destroying the place. The adversary noted that it was easy to play the daredevil from the comfort of one's own secret lair, after which they headed off to destroy the gravity machine. Meanwhile, a wounded T-Boy addressed Barr and told him that it wouldn't change anything, as the gravity wouldn't come back and the sun wouldn't rise, with the entire city going up in flames. However, he claimed that he could still help, revealing that there was a personal teleporter in his chest compartment that had enough power to send one person back to Earth. Author's note: this teleporter is the same model that Senya had in Detective Rave's case notes, which Rave used to teleport the exploding purifier device onto Senya's ship. Bar asked T-Boy why he would make him such an offer, to which T-Boy told him that he had footage of the day when Bar's friends had left, and that he had learned that Bar had chosen not to go back home because of the overwhelmingly negative reviews that his survival books had received. Author's notes: some of these reviews were straight up cyberbullying. One person said, "I hear the author got sucked into another dimension. Good riddance." D-Boy laughed at Bar's indecision, claiming that even though he now finally had a way back home, there was no one there who wanted him back. Meanwhile, the adversary reached the gravity machine and managed to destroy it. However, they were surprised to find that the countdown had not stopped. T-Boy then laughed and asked if they had thought that attacking the machine would be enough to stop it. Author's note: as the gravity machine continues counting down and the adversary attempts to stop it, Ilium and mechanics have some exclusive dialogue in which they say that their mechanical expertise is more general rather than the specialized knowledge needed to stop the gravity machine. To T-Boy's surprise, however, Bar chose to help the adversary rather than to go home. Because Rassel had managed to contact him and had helped him to conquer his fears, reminded him that even if his friends didn't like his books, they still liked him as a person, adding that it took courage to open up to others. Barr had then recalled the advice that the adversary had given them about being brave, after which he had decided to go back and help them. Barr told the adversary that he would take the machine and jump, and with the city being upside down, he would reach the sky, so that the machine would be high enough that the explosion wouldn't kill anyone. As he jumped off with the machine, he heard the voices of his friends speaking to him through the walkie-talkie, telling him that they were still awaiting his return. Just as the machine exploded, he used the teleporter to return back to Earth. With the explosion of the gravity machine, the dimensional gate to Earth opened up once again. Sometime later, the townspeople found a newspaper that had washed ashore, which showed that Barr had returned safely back to Earth, and that his new survival book on Reverse City was poised to become a bestseller. Because of this, even his earlier works were beginning to get noticed, and Barr was growing famous. Author's note: Kinesis wonders whether Jay will pick up a copy of Barr's book for him. Though the city remained upside down, Rassel was relieved that Barr had managed to return home. She also added that with T-Boy's defeat, they could safely view the sunset. She then gave the adversary her arcane symbols as payment for their help. Though she added that T-Boy's robot body had gone missing, she also explained that she had found a broken piece of his mask stained with blood, causing them to realize that T-Boy had been there in person the whole time. Elsewhere, T-Boy was escaping in his airship when he was contacted by his sister, Senya Angler. He warned her not to tell their father about his failure, though Senya merely laughed and told him that she would consider keeping his secret. Senya then told him to take off his mask, which she found ridiculous, revealing T-Boy's wounded face from Bar's gunshot. Senya asked T-Boy what he thought of the Alliance's pet hero, to which T-Boy told her that he believed that they'd be able to use the adversary. Author's note: T-Boy means that they'll be able to use the adversary in order to have them open the way to Odium for their father. When Senya asks T-Boy about the adversary, her dialogue will change depending on the player's gender. If the player is female, she'll ask T-Boy whether he's fallen for us. If the player is male, she'll ask whether he thought that we were cool.